It was a really good weekend of women's college basketball. Now that all the teams are in conference play, you really get a good look at these teams and are able to start to figure out where they are. In this video, I am going to look at the elite teams, a team that wants to try to get up into the elite, and then other teams that are trying to figure out problems that have developed. And then I am going to highlight the best games coming up this week. If you like the content, then please consider subscribing to the channel. All right, let's get into this. So the two best teams in women's college basketball, I think it's no surprise here. It is South Carolina and UCLA. Now, these two teams might pick up a loss or two as they get through the gauntlet, which is the SEC and Pac-12. But in terms of well-rounded, deep teams, these teams are it. They're both loaded in the front court, back court, and are on a different level in comparison to everybody else. And what's interesting is they're very similar. So they both have super bigs in UCLA with Betts and South Carolina with Cardoso. They also have power forwards that can shoot with UCLA with Dugalich and South Carolina with Chloe Kitts. Then their backcourts are very comparable. So UCLA has Rice and Charisma Osborne at the point, which is very comparable to Te-Hina Paopao and Raven Johnson. And then they both have firepower off, that little third guard that's an instant spark of offense with UCLA, with London Jones, and then obviously South Carolina can have Fool Wiley, who's coming off the bench as well. Now, UCLA today got a tough win over Oregon State, and Oregon State, to their credit, they played hard and well. Regan Beers gave Lauren Betts everything, so it was good. She was taking her outside with her jump shot and just made Betts work really, really hard and actually won the matchup. And if forced to choose between these two teams, between UCLA and South Carolina, that's why I'd go South Carolina. I just think they have a little bit more shooting. And if they get into one of those games where you have to play small ball, I like the idea of South Carolina being able to match up better. But they're both loaded. It is really splitting hairs between these two teams. Now, the team aspiring to get to the penthouse is obviously LSU. They squared off today versus Ole Miss, and they had a good, hard-fought win at Ole Miss. It was a rowdy crowd, and Ole Miss made a strong run in the third quarter and really gave LSU a bit of trouble with their pressure full-court press because it was taking them too long to get into their offensive sets. I thought LSU actually looked a lot better once Haley Van Lith picked up her fourth foul. Mulkey took her off, and then Poa was at the point, and it just seemed right when Poa came in, they started breaking the press a whole lot easier. And I don't think HVL returned to the game, but I mean, at that point, LSU had gotten a lead. There probably was no need to bring her back in anyway and just being careful with her plantar fasciitis in her foot. But HVL does not look like a real natural point guard. I mean, it's definitely not as smooth or as good as they had last year with Alexis Morris. I mean, I think that's pretty clear. I think LSU fans would concede that. But really, their hope is that they have so much overwhelming firepower when Morrow's on her game, and then if HVL's hitting shots, and then combine that with the firepower that Michaela Williams brings, they're just going to overwhelm teams. But when they fare off against the really upper echelon teams, like when they face South Carolina at the end of January, it will be an interesting matchup because if they have the turnovers like they did today, I think they had like 20 turnovers today, they will not be able to survive that. They're going to have to tighten it up with the ball if they hope to beat South Carolina. As well, I'm really curious to see how the length of South Carolina, how that impacts Reese and Morrow, if they're able to handle that well. In addition, I want to see if Mulkey matches up against them or potentially goes super small and takes Reese off the court and goes something like Poa, HVL, Johnson, Williams, and Morrow. Would she dare do that? I mean, I know Kim Mulkey likes her big, so it's probably unlikely, but it would be an interesting matchup because I want to see if they want to try to force Cardoso to come outside to guard somebody on the perimeter. Because South Carolina has previously shown they're more than happy to keep their big, whether it be Cardoso or Boston, in the lane and and let Reese take that outside jumper. So I wonder if Mulkey would make that adjustment or not, to be determined. Anyway, we've got time before that matchup happens, but those are obviously the three upper echelon teams. Now, in preseason, it was considered many considered that UConn would be there as well, but obviously they have been decimated by injuries with Fudd, and then the latest with Aubrey Griffin going down with a knee injury that looks like it's season ending. So they are not near the team that was expected. It looked like they were starting to figure it out. They were just biting the bullet, going small ball, playing Paige Beckers at the 4 on defense and saying, all right, it's a math equation. We're going to outscore you, and then we'll come off the bench with Aubrey Griffin and get more athletic, and we have a nice mix of players. And now they still have a good starting 5 with the 2 freshmen. Ashlyn Shade and KK Arnold have played well, but really they don't have a bench now. Gina Auriemma has been pretty tough on Ice Brady this year. He gave her more minutes because I think he's sort of biting the bullet because he needs to get her ready. The other one, Cadence Samuels, who's essentially like a long forward as well. He's giving her more minutes, but he crushed her after the game. Like if you watch the press conference, it was like Samuels obviously watched Aubrey Griffin and that she usually passes up shots, so she thought she would make up for it. And then he's like, Aubrey Griffin gives us defense and transition. And, we got none of that today, which was just a clear shot at Samuels. And then said, the only thing Samuels did was kill our 3-point percentage. So it's, but you expect him to do that anyway. But it's a tough go for UConn because really they only have 5 players they really trust. And 2 of those are freshmen. So it's just going to be a work in progress, and you'll really see where they are. They're getting into the Big East right now, and it looks like they're the class of the Big East, which isn't surprising. But they'll have their good test when they face off against South Carolina in February. That'll really give you a picture of where UConn is at. The other team that had very high hopes at the start of the season was Utah. Like they were just a couple of free throws away from beating LSU. And LSU said that was the best team they faced last year. But their second best player, so Neepkins, has fractured her foot and out for the season. And that just seems like it's almost too much for them to overcome because Elisa Peely is just having to do everything. In a lot of ways, they remind me of the San Diego Chargers football team when they're semi-good because they're always in the game. It seems like they can win, but you always know that they might come up a little bit short just because I don't think they have enough. And I think their sort of bad luck season, I think that they're on the way to having was sort of exemplified today when they had a tough loss against Arizona. They got a tough whistle, man. Like there was one call where at the end of the game where it should have been a tie-up and their ball and them shooting to win it, but the ref called over the back, and it's like, wow, that was brutal. Like the baseline ref didn't call anything, and then the ref from the 3-point line came in and overruled it and called it over the back. And Lynn Roberts, man, she was losing her mind, understandably. The last team that looked for all money to be elite was Texas, and unfortunately with Rory Harmon's ACL injury, it just doesn't look the case. So they lost their game against Baylor. They are still talented. I think we'll get a picture this week of how well they will be able to regroup as they will face TCU at Texas on Wednesday, and then Texas will go to Kansas State on Saturday. So that should be a good test for Texas. The game on Thursday should be a nice test for LSU as Texas A&M is coming into LSU. And then really good matchups. Speaking of Utah earlier, Stanford goes to Utah on Friday, which will be a good matchup. And one Utah really needs to win to be a top 16 team for the tournament and get the first and second round at home. Number 14, Indiana versus Iowa is the highlight matchup on Saturday night, so that should be a Caitlin Clark showcase. And then on Sunday, we get the UCLA-USC rematch, which should be very tasty indeed to see if Juju can get a bit of revenge on UCLA. Anyway, now over to you, your comments, your poison. Do you think LSU can move into the penthouse? Do you think, like me, that South Carolina is slightly better than UCLA, or have your take on that? Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great night.